Representative Thielen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm speaking against this bill, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much. The bill would establish a separate and distinct entity transmitting power to and receiving revenue from an existing electric utility that is not owned or controlled by that electric utility. In other words, the bill establishes, on page 8, a certified cable company that will be subject to regulation by the Public Utilities Commission and defined as a public utility. Mr. Speaker, about 108 years ago, the United States Congress enacted a law, and it provided as follows, and it's relevant to this bill. The bill affirmed an act by the Territory of Hawaii that established or granted the Hawaiian Electric Company a special franchise and special privileges to operate in Hawaii. The 58th Congress of the United States put in their law, provided that the legislature of the Territory of Hawaii shall not grant to any corporation, association, or individual any special privilege or franchise without the approval of the Congress of the United States. In other words, setting up a new cable company subject to regulation by the Public Utilities Commission and defined as a public utility requires first congressional approval. The bill, then I would like to go on just briefly over to the island of Kauai. And you'll say, how did KIUC come into operation if there needed to be congressional approval? Well, you go back to 1927, nearly 100 years ago, and that is when the utility was authorized, then approved by Congress in 1928, in accordance with the Organic Act. It was later amended by Congress in 1954 to enlarge the districts covered on the island of Kauai. Mr. Speaker, this is very similar to what Congress did with the U.S. Postal Service. The U.S. Postal Service Congress set up the U.S. Postal Service and provided that no other system for delivering mail can be established absent Congress's consent. Same thing. And we have the same thing here, where congressional approval is required. Mr. Speaker, I am going to go into the demerits of the bill in a minute, but I wanted to make it absolutely clear. We've done research, and we have not found anything that Congress did to repeal its requirement, and I want to read those words again. The legislature of the Territory of Hawaii, now it's us, shall not grant to any corporation, association, or individual any special privilege or franchise without the approval of the Congress of the United States. There's been no, when I spoke to the people at I believe it was from DBED, or no, the Energy Division, at the committee hearing, and I asked them, have you sought congressional approval for what you're trying to do by establishing this special privilege and this new utility? Have you sought it? They said, no, we haven't. I got back to my office and found that the Public Utilities Commission, and I believe DBED, had called my office to say, what on earth is the number of that law from Congress in 1903. They weren't aware of it. So I don't know what they've done since this period of time, but we cannot go ahead with this legislation.
Representative Fontaine, will you your time? Yes, Mr. Speaker.
So ordered. Please proceed, Representative Thielen.
We cannot, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative. We cannot go ahead with this measure, Mr. Speaker, without the congressional approval. It's a deal stopper. It's an absolute deal stopper. And then I want to go back to the committee hearing again and just reference what the Governor Abercrombie said. When I talked to him about we were giving really a no-risk opportunity to Hawaiian Electric for the work that it was going to be doing on land to accept the cable and that transmission. And I said it's a corporate no risk. It's a free ride for the corporation. All the costs, all the expenditures get passed through to the ratepayer, the consumer, all of our constituents. And Governor Abercrombie said he doesn't intend it to be, and I quote, a free risk for the utility, end of quote. But it is. Yes, the Public Utilities Commission is supposed to only grant reasonable costs that are substantiated, but you take a look at page 13. The Public Utilities Commission shall establish a cable surcharge to allow recovery of the high voltage electric transmission cable system costs. That's the underwater portion. And the PUC is going to allow recovery of those costs. Well, from whom? Who do you think? Everyone in this room, everyone on our island. I'm not clear if it's neighbor islands as well, but it's certainly all of our ratepayers. And for those that don't get a utility bill, they'll be paying in other ways the costs of this increased cost for electricity. And then the bill on page 15 goes on for Hawaiian Electric. And Hawaiian Electric can recover through an automatic rate adjustment clause its revenue requirement resulting from the capital costs that it prudently incurs for on-island transmission infrastructure. And then to rub salt into the wound, Mr. Speaker, on page 17, if Hawaiian Electric elects not to complete the on-island transmission infrastructure, the utility, or if it's prevented from completing it, it still can recover its costs. So there's absolutely no corporate risk. Mr. Speaker, you're a businessman. Have you ever been guaranteed that you will not incur any risk? I would think not. I mean, anyone that is in this room that is in business, has actually run a small business in this state, I can guarantee you that those small business people, woman or man, never were guaranteed not to have any risk. But we're allowing Hawaiian Electric to do a corporate, no-risk, incredibly expensive project, and if for some reason it doesn't go through, they still recover all their costs. Now, Governor Abercrombie said he didn't intend it to be risk-free for the utility, but the plain language of the bill makes it risk-free for the utility. Mr. Speaker, on the first portion of my remarks, I said that we legally cannot do this without congressional approval. On the second portion, I look at, is it morally responsible to do something that is going to burden our ratepayers and the ones on Oahu on top of paying the added 0.5% GET tax for the steel on rail project? You reach a tipping point where people basically won't be able to afford to stay here and to live here. And you reach a tipping point where our young people say, what you've done, you've made it so costly.
Representative Ching, review your time.
Yes,
Please
I
proceed,
will.
Representative Thielen.
Thank you.
But would you conclude
What
your...
you've done-
Can
what-
you conclude your remarks, since you have had 2 times already? This particular measure is being referred to what committee?
I will, Mr. Speaker, but it's
And
a
the
billion
concerns-
dollar, it's a $1 billion
And the
bill.
concerns and questions that you have on the floor of the House, you can ask the testifiers to get the response that you are being educated on the questions and concerns that you have. But please continue.
Thank you.
So we can summarize this particular measure.
I wish I could, Mr. Speaker, but the problem is we're talking about a $1 billion bill. And a $1 billion bill needs more than 3 minutes, 5 minutes. It needs a lot more thought from the members. And when you think of what we are doing economically, and we don't need to do it. We have the energy available on the individual islands to take care of the individual islands. We have that energy available. But when we set up a system where you're going to say to your grandkids, I wish you could afford to stay here. I know utility rates are so high. I know we're paying such a high tax for GET. I know the rail is costing more. And Mr. Speaker, what do you say to your grandkids? They may not be born yet. I hope they will be, and I would hope they'd be able to stay here. But the step we're taking day after day in this legislature, and particularly with this $1 billion bill, we're going to be saying to them, go some other place where you can afford to live, because you can't afford it in Hawaii. The bill, I believe, is seriously legally defective, and the bill, I believe, is not necessary because we have the adequate natural resources off of each island that we can tap into. And the bill provides a corporate free ride, which I think is reprehensible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe that the question that you have posed before this body will be addressed in the Consumer Protection Commerce Committee. And finally, for the fiscal impact, it has to be passed on second reading to be referred to the Committee on Finance. Members of the House, I think you can realize how transparent and open we are. There was 2 committees that heard this particular measure, and they decided to pass it out to the next committee, which is the Consumer Protection and Commerce Committee. And finally, for those on the Consumer Protection Commerce Committee, you'll have the opportunity of asking the questions that the Representative Thielen has posed on the floor of this House. If it gets out of the Consumer Protection and Commerce Committee, it goes on to the Finance Committee, where the question is this particular project a $1 billion boondoggle, or is it for the greater good of the state of Hawaii?